start the recording. And I just want to welcome you all. My name is Lynn Coburn. I'm one of the coordinators for the Pearl project. And I'm doing this webinar with Justina Kanza today. This is one webinar in a webinar series that we have. And today's session is one that is going to be of interest to many people. It's about the impact of web content accessibility guidelines and the implications, particularly for accessibility of knowledge, information, resources for people with disabilities on websites from around the world. So we welcome Katrina and Sarika, and we'll have a bit more of an introduction to them in a minute. When you're entering the webinar and during the webinar, we encourage you to just keep your microphone off and also keep your video off. You are welcome during the discussion times to put the video on if you would like. We do have people with vision impairments in the meeting, and so we try not to use the chat function during the time that people are speaking because it interferes with the conversation that we're getting from the speakers. So during discussion, we will open the chat for comments then. We do want to have enough time for discussion today. We know that there will be lots of questions, and we're a small enough group that when it comes time for discussion, you can either unmute your microphone and speak, or you can raise your hand using the raised hand function, or you can put your comment or question in the chat box. I'm just going to give a very brief background about Pearl for those of you who are not familiar with Pearl. We're a community of practice that's focused on disability inclusive development research. There are many related activities that this community of practice is engaged in. We have researchers and others such as students and community members from the Global North and the Global South. Our funding comes from a 3-year Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council grant. We have annual meetings, 3-day institutes. We're developing a number of resources, and as I mentioned, a number of other activities such as this webinar series. Our website is under the OTIC lab at the University of Toronto. And today we're talking about the importance of websites, how we need high quality research evidence for interventions for people to really be able to improve their lives, to be able to do rehabilitation well, to know what is good practice. Much of the information that people use around the world now is from websites. And so one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, are websites accessible? And how can people with disabilities get the information they need when they go online? And a related question for those of us who are web creators or managers or contribute to websites, how do you know if your information is accessible for people with disabilities? So today we're talking about doing better in website design. And Justina, is this where I pass it over to you, or do you want me to keep going?
I'm okay if you keep going, Lynn.
Okay, so we are going to learn about a little bit about what web accessibility means, how it is implemented, why it's important. And we're really delighted to have Katrina and Sarika do this presentation about the web content accessibility guidelines, because I think they represent most of us. Most of us are not very familiar with these guidelines. And so they're going to tell us about how they are learning to use these guidelines, guidelines that were created to ensure that there was international consensus about web accessibility and the benefits of having guidelines that people can follow as they're developing and maintaining their websites. So we're really hoping that this session helps you to think about how you, regardless of where you are located and what you do, but how you can use web accessibility features and resources to evaluate the accessibility of the websites that are so important in our work. Now over to Justina.
Thank you, Lynn. So a quick introduction of myself. I'm Justina and I'm a research assistant with the PEARL team. Our guest speakers today are Katrina and Sarika. So Katrina is currently in her second year of Occupational Therapy program. She just graduated from the University of Waterloo in 2020 with a joint honors science and psychology degree. She is very passionate about design processes and universal design, and she also hopes to make large-scale changes to build in digital environments in the future, so that these spaces can be more accessible to everyone and improve the quality of life. Sarika is currently in her second year as well of the Occupational Therapy program, and she has completed her undergrad degree in science and business with a specialization in biology and in cooperative education at the University of Waterloo. Sarika is enthusiastic about how to make business processes in management more efficient, whether that's reallocating resources, proactive decision-making, or providing education. So both students, Sarika and Katrina, are currently partaking in a research project with their supervisor, Lynn, and Julius, as well as Mirabel and others from the eBase Africa team as part of the Occupational Therapy program. And what they're doing there is mainly to enhance their knowledge and skills such as scholarly practitioners. So both of them are interested in how occupational therapists can advocate and enable change in built and digital environments to promote equity and inclusion. So I will pass it over to Sarika and Katrina to take it on from here.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, just give me 1 second to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen of the title sequence?
Yes, it looks good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for joining us today. Thanks, Justina and Lynn, for an amazing introduction. So today we wanted to talk about our research project as well as web content accessibility. And our project will be called, or our presentation is called Invited to Dinner and Not the Table, the Impact of Web Content Accessibility. So thank you, Justina, again for the bios. So these are our credentials. And Katrina, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, so I'm Katrina. And again, thank you for the lovely introductions earlier. And I just did want to mention before we move on that Sarika and I are both students who do not have computer science backgrounds, but we've identified the significance of a proactive approach to the delivery of digital content in an equitable manner. And we recognize that we are still learning about more about web accessibility, and we're excited to be sharing with you what we've learned so far.
So the purpose of presenting today is to provide education regarding web accessibility, like Lynn mentioned. So within the hour, we'll be discussing the following objectives. So we want to appreciate the significance of web accessibility, provide examples of how to make components of a web page more accessible based on the WCAG 2.0 success criteria, which Katrina will be discussing shortly. We also want to understand the gap between the current state of web accessibility compliance and legislation internationally. And lastly, we want to have a practice session using an automatic evaluator because it could be used as a preliminary investigation of errors that are related to web accessibility. So afterwards, we'll have a brief discussion period. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask us then. And our overall goal is for us to be familiar with WCAG and how it can improve the development of digital content and being more inclusive moving forward.
So what is web accessibility? Web accessibility means that websites, tools, and techniques are designed and developed in a way that people with disabilities can use them. This means that people with diverse ranges of hearing, movement, sight, and cognitive ability would be able to use these websites and would not be excluded based on their needs and ways of doing. An accessible website would allow someone to perceive, understand, navigate, interact with, and contribute to the web. So why is web accessibility significant? Well, the World Health Organization reported that 15% of the world population has at least one disability. With the number of persons with disabilities increasing across the world, it is becoming increasingly important that websites are accessible to everyone, including those with disabilities. The internet is very useful as it hosts many websites that provide quick access to valuable information. This information can be regarding education, employment, government, commerce, healthcare, and recreation. Just think about how often and how easily many able-bodied people can obtain this type of information at the click of a button. This information and research can also be vital to making informed decisions, such as when considering different types of treatment available when looking at healthcare-related information. If people with disabilities cannot access websites, especially health-related websites, they are then left at a significant disadvantage and can have less favorable outcomes regarding healthcare. It's clear how important web accessibility is, and that's why the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has defined access to information and communication technologies as a basic human right.
So let's go over some benefits of web accessibility. The first benefit is the development and maintaining accessible websites that are easily navigatable, and all sections of the website provide a logical order. This ensures that the user can find information easily and be more informed. For example, it'll be easier to search for specific content based on the headings and subheadings. Also, when talking about navigation, we often only consider the use of mouse. But most people don't consider keyboard navigation. Keyboard navigation is the use of tab and enter keys to sort through the headings and subheadings of a page in order to jump to desired elements and gather pertinent information. So another benefit of web accessibility is that users can perceive auditory, visual, and textual elements through multiple methods. This is beneficial because users can consume content through the user's ideal method based on their needs, abilities, and preferences. With that being said, in order to promote web accessibility for all individuals, we need to consider how disabilities might impact how users interact with web content. So let's go through some examples. So when somebody has an auditory disability, they will not rely on sound or speech for information. This includes videos with sound. Thus, they will benefit from closed captioning containing audio description and dialogue. An example would be having a text on the screen saying alarm ringing when the sound of an alarm is present in the video. This aids in the understanding of the video without relying on the sound itself. On the other hand, those with visual impairments do not rely on visual information. So this includes text, pictures, or videos. They will benefit from described video, alternative text, color contrast, and keyboard navigation settings. So a layout is also very important because these web pages need to be sequenced and labeled well to ensure that the assistive technology can read the content appropriately. So these features ensure that the users will have additional description of the visual information. Now moving on to those with cognitive impairments. They will benefit from using closed captioning with audio descriptions and described video for additional modalities and information, in order for them to process information at the individual's pace. Also, web pages should be organized in a logical order so that it's easily navigatable. People with language barriers can also benefit from multiple methods of content because they can select how they want the content to be delivered to them. For example, if reading comprehension is stronger than listening, then they might prefer using subtitles or alternative text. Those with stronger auditory comprehension can benefit from described video or alternative text. These individuals can rely on assistive technology to provide content through text-to-speech for better comprehension. And lastly, people with physical or motor challenges might not use a mouse due to fine motor movement and coordination issues. Thus, keyboard navigation is essential to access web content, or these individuals might use screen readers. Thus, the web page needs to be compatible with assistive technologies. Don't worry, we will be going through some of these features later in the presentation. Also, with that being said, people without disabilities can also benefit from web accessibility. For example, people using mobile devices or smartwatches due to their small screens might have challenges accessing that information. Older adults with changing abilities due to aging might also benefit. Also, people with temporary disability, such as a broken arm or someone who's temporarily lost their glasses. Also, people with situational limits, such as being in a bright room with lots of sunlight or in an environment where they cannot listen to audio. Also, people using slow internet content or those have limited and expansive bandwidth for internet might not be able to stream videos. Another benefit is that when a web page is web accessible, it will be compatible with assistive technology, such as screen readers. So for example, NVDA for Androids and VoiceOver for iOS are common software used by many people. People who rely on screen readers include individuals with partial or minimal sight, individuals with limited color vision or color blindness, older adults, individuals with minimal fine motor skills, individuals who have difficulty understanding the meaning of photographs, drawings, or other images, and individuals with challenges with flashing colors. But keep in mind, this might not be an exhaustive list, and this could go on and on forever. So screen readers are very valuable for a lot of people. Another benefit is that the internet is multi-purpose. So it could be used for different ways and methods to get information and onwards. So some examples would include social inclusion and connectedness between perhaps children, adults, and older adults, people in rural and urban areas, people in developing and developed countries. So the social inclusion aspect is very important. Also, for gathering information or answering questions that one might have related to health, news, sports, entertainment, or business as well. As you can see, there are many overlapping characteristics of web content presentation that could benefit varying populations and could get kind of confusing to sort out who will benefit from certain features and others who do not. Thus, an international initiative was taken to ensure that web developers have guidelines that allow for web content to be accessed by individuals with varying needs. Now, this is called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines.
So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, also known as WCAG, were created by the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, in collaboration with individuals and organizations internationally. It was created to provide stakeholders such as web content developers guidance on how to make web content more accessible to persons with disabilities. The WCAG, which has had 3 releases so far, WCAG 1.0, 2.0, and most recently 2.1, is one of the most recognized web accessibility standards around the world. The WCAG contains several layers of guidance for promoting accessibility and accommodations to persons with disabilities. The first layer includes 4 principles which outline that web content should be 1, perceivable by the user using different senses as needed, 2, operable and that it is easy to interact with using different modalities, 3, understandable and that a wide audience can comprehend it, and 4, robust and that it can be used with different platforms or assistive technologies. For each principle, there are guidelines, 13 in total, with 3 different conformance levels, level A, AA, and AAA, with level A being the easiest to achieve and level AAA being the most difficult to achieve. For a website to be considered accessible, conformance of level AA should be met. Each guideline has a set of testable success criteria and we will discuss that success criteria in more depth and provide examples later in the presentation. The last layer includes techniques that help meet success criteria or go beyond them. The W3C encourages authors of websites to employ all layers of guidance to better accommodate for a wide range of users.
So in recent years, the government has recognized the need for web content accessibility. So a variety of countries in North America, Europe, Asia, as well as Australia have addressed web accessibility in imposing laws and policies and amending non-discrimination laws within human rights acts to ensure inclusivity. So these laws and policies are based on the WCAG 2.0 guidelines. Each country has their own legislation that address some of the regulations related to web content development. After doing some searching, we've highlighted some legislation, but it was very difficult to find definitive policies and legislation. And oftentimes they were buried or involved a lot of subjective interpretation. So this is what we've gathered so far. So in Canada, a mandatory policy was enacted that requires WCAG 2.0 level AA for all government websites. And this was outlined in the Policy on Communication and Federal Identity. And this was enacted in 2016. In the United States, Section 508, Standards for Electronic and Information Technology, outlines that all federal government websites and private sites, and some of them, including airlines, will need to comply to WCAG 2.0 level AA. Section 508 of the US Rehabilitation Act of 1973 have been amended over the years as technology has been evolving. In Cameroon, there was no specific legislation or standards. And for members of the European Union, Web and Mobile Accessibility Directive states that all public websites need to conform to WCAG 2.0 level AA to allow for procurement. Recently, there was a draft in progress under the European Accessibility Act that states that both public and private websites will need to conform to a derivative of the WCAG 2.0 level AA credentials. Also, as part of the UN Sustainability Development Goals, they highlighted the need for increased accountability practices in institutions and policies, and they want to include more persons with disabilities in the implementation of the 2030 agenda. With all these actions, it's apparent that WCAG 2.0 principles are directing web content creation towards universal design.
Unfortunately, not many people are aware of the necessity of making websites accessible, what features make a website accessible, and what actions to take to make them accessible. There are currently many sites and tools that have been developed with accessibility barriers, making these websites difficult or impossible for someone to use. Many studies have been conducted around the world demonstrating the web accessibility failures that occur. For example, a study done in Brazil investigated federal university websites and found that most of these websites do not follow accessibility standards. A similar study in Hungary investigated Hungarian university websites and found that the majority of these websites are not accessible to students who have color deficiency difficulties. A large European study also looked into the accessibility of healthcare-related websites and detected a large number of errors. One significant error that was detected most often was missing alternative text for images, which we will discuss later in our presentation. One study conducted in Korea had blind and second-level sight impaired individuals evaluate government and public agency healthcare websites in Korea. They found that these websites had problems across all 4 principles of accessibility. Lastly, an investigation was conducted on Canadian real estate websites. Real estate websites are where many home buyers start their search. However, most of these websites are not accessible to blind or visually impaired individuals, as they do not provide descriptive alternative text for the images of the homes. As you can see, based on these examples, website inaccessibility is a very common problem around the world and occurs in many different sectors. The results of these studies only show a fraction of the data available demonstrating this inaccessibility, and we believe more studies should be conducted in other countries to obtain a better understanding of what is currently happening.
So now we're going to go over some common elements of many web pages and how they could fit WCAG standards. So our presentation will be focusing on level A and double A because it is part of a lot of legislation. Just for some background, in order for a website to conform to level AA standards, it will need to comply to level A success criteria in addition to the specific criteria of level AA. So in total, there are 38 success criteria for level AA. But today we'll be focusing on some of them because these are the most common ones that we've seen after reviewing many websites. If you would like to obtain more a better understanding of the success criteria and the specifics of it, we'll be posting, I think Katrina, I've posted a URL link to a summary of the WCAG guidelines. And as we go through this presentation, feel free to follow along using these guidelines and success criteria for better understanding. So for our first example, we wanted to talk about heading sequence. Heading sequence is important because it allows for easy navigation between the sections of a page. It could be imagined as a table of contents. So in this example, we chose to use the About the Pearl project webpage. And on this page, there are 3 levels of headings. So the first being About the Pearl project. The second heading is, there's actually 3 of them. So there are the what are the Pearl network and the Pearl project, the contact us, as well as the funders and donors. Within the first heading 2, there are 2 heading 3s. So these are labeled, how do I become a member of the Pearl network? And is there a registration process? So this satisfies success criteria 2.4.6 because these headings are descriptive of the content under each section, aka the body. These headings allow or follow a logical sequence. So after Katrina and I reviewed some websites, you'd be surprised at how many websites don't have a logical sequence and are misordered. So for example, they might have a heading 1, heading 2, they skip heading 3, and they go straight to heading 4. And this would impact the use of a screen reader when reading through the web page. As well as keyboard navigation features might be impacted as well because of the inordered or mismatched order of headings. The second example that we're going to go over today are search bars. So search fields are also very common in web pages, usually at the top, and it's consistent throughout all of the web pages of a website. So a common element of a search bar is the alternative text. So when a non-text element is present on a screen, the visual element needs to be described through text as well. So for example, when using a search bar, there's usually a magnifying glass image to the right. So you can see on this picture for YouTube, there's a magnifying glass there. There should be a meaningful alternative text for this button. So it should say search and not just magnifying glass, because that does not emulate what the button actually will do. Also, oftentimes search fields are created using a layout table. And this is used to present the search field with labels of search and a proximal search button. However, as per success criteria 1.3.1, layout tables should only be used for data tables and not be used for creating visual elements such as a search field. If a screen reader tries to read a search field that was composed using a layout table, it will have challenges identifying the purpose of this element and will recognize it as a data table and not a search bar. So I mentioned data tables. So our next example will be a data table. So data tables are difficult to navigate when using a screen reader if they're not labeled properly. So for example, it's important to have each row labeled as well as each column labeled with meaningful titles. So each cell needs to be labeled as either a heading or a data cell. So for this example, the table should be coded with column labels so that the screen reader can encounter this as a table as it reads it. So after doing some research and using screen readers, the screen reader would say the following if the criteria were matched and compliant to the WCAG 2.0 guidelines. So here goes. So this is what the screen reader would say. So it'd start with saying table 3 demographics with 3 columns and 2 rows. Then it would go on to say row 1, column 1, name, column 2, age, column 3, hometown. Then it would say row 2, column 1, Anna, column 2, 29, column 3, Toronto, Canada. and it'll go on down the table. Another common element is the company logos. So many companies have logos near the top of the page, similar to the search field, and it's usually consistent throughout their entire websites. This element is designed to redirect the user back to the homepage when it's clicked. So for example, when on YouTube, you go back to the homepage by clicking the YouTube logo on the top left. Since it will send the user to a new website, in this case, the YouTube homepage, the alternative text should specify the name of the document or web application that the user will be sent to. The purpose of this is that the user can determine if they want to follow that link once they click it. Another example are pre-recorded pre-recorded videos. When a website has a pre-recorded video embedded on their site, there are specific criteria that needs to be satisfied in order to comply to WCAG standards. So for the first is that there needs to be a text-based alternative. The purpose of the transcript is to provide an equivalent to what is presented visually. This makes it possible for users with or without visual impairments to review the content, and the approach can also make it easier for those with cognitive, language, and learning disabilities to understand the content of what would be provided as a parallel presentation. Another level A criteria is captions. So this allows for those who are deaf or have hearing impairments, and they can watch the video and follow the dialogue using captions. In addition, the transcript for level AA, there should be audio descriptions. Audio descriptions provide information about actions, characters, scene changes, and on-screen text that are important and are not described or spoken in the video. Therefore, the user does not need to see the video in order to understand the content of the video. Our last example would be color contrast. The purpose of this success criterion is to provide enough contrast between the text and its background, so that people could see the text even if they have moderately low vision. So WCAG references contrast ratios between 1:1, which is white text on white background, and the extreme other side would be the 21:1 ratio, which would mean black text on white background. All text and images of text should have a contrast ratio of at least 4.5:1. There are some examples on the screen here where it is a minimum requirement of the 4.5:1 ratio. But as you can tell, it is very difficult to read even though it matches a minimum requirement. And so 5:1 ratio is highly recommended or higher. There are some exceptions to this success criteria, which includes large text. So that includes 18-point text or 14 bold text, which only requires a 3:1 contrast ratio. Another exception would be decorative or logos. They do not require any contrast requirements.
So now you may be concerned by the number of things to look out for when it comes to web accessibility. Rest assured, there are website accessibility checkers that conveniently check websites for you and provide a report of the accessibility errors encountered on the site. We will present to you some of the checkers we find useful. The checkers we'll be discussing today are all based on the WCAG and are quite simple to use, as you only need to input the URL of the website you want to check into the appropriate fields. So first we'll discuss SiteImprove. SiteImprove offers an accessibility summary and score in terms of a percent. With the summary, it will provide a description of the 15 common accessibility issues and which success criteria the site adheres to or fails. You can use this checker for free, but to obtain an understanding of where the errors occur on the site and to obtain updates on the web page accessibility, there will be an associated cost. So there's quite a limited information in the free version. This checker is typically used by businesses, and the website allows you to connect with an expert to obtain a demo or consultation. So next is aChecker. aChecker is free and provides a detailed report by going through each success criteria that the web page fails to adhere to and which line of code it occurs in. It provides a list of known errors, likely errors, and potential errors that you can investigate further. If you want to monitor the accessibility of the web page and understand the compliance with AODA across the site, then there will be a cost of $99 per month. This checker provides several options, so you can choose to check the website using different versions of WCAG and different compliance levels. And that's what is depicted in this image there on this slide. Next is webaccessibility.com. This checker identifies WCAG 2.1 errors and provides nice, simple summaries of the most common issues and where they are located on the site. It also provides a score to have an understanding of the overall accessibility of the page. The website also provides helpful guidance and learning resources to help improve the website accessibility. And this checker also allows you to view the progress of the web page accessibility over time at no cost. What sets this apart from the other checkers is that it tests all iterations of the code, including web components, which the other checkers don't do, as they only test static code. So the last checker we will share with you today is Wave. Wave is free and has a Chrome extension that is available. Wave will provide a summary of the errors and findings based on 6 categories. So errors, contrast errors, alerts, features, structural elements, and ARIA. For each error, there's a detailed summary of why this issue is important and what can be done to improve accessibility. Wave displays markers on the actual page you are checking to point out different findings and allows you to look at where errors are within the code as well. Lastly, Wave allows for human evaluation of the web content, as it does provide alerts and details of what one should be looking for. So next, I would like to provide a brief demonstration of Wave using the WHO's website. And the reason we chose to demonstrate Wave is that we find it quite intuitive, and it, like we said earlier, it helps you see the errors right on the page. So we thought that would be the best to share with you all. And I will start sharing my screen. And please let me know if you're able to see this clearly.
Looks good. Thanks, Katrina.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I have input the URL already into the field here, and all you have to do is press the arrow. And as you can see, it's just loading the report now. And there's all these little icons across the page that show the errors or the alerts and features. So as you can see, there's a really nice brief summary of all these different findings, and then you can go into details to get a better understanding of what's happening. So earlier we did mention some contrast errors, which are common on websites. And if you're interested in finding where these contrast errors occur, you could click on here and it will take you to the different spots in which these contrast errors occur. And if you want to find more information, you click the little I, and it will give you a description of what this error means. So very low contrast between text and background colors, and then why it matters and what to do. So for example, they said increase the contrast between the foreground text color and the background color. So as you can see, they have, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but for example, the health topics icon here, the contrast is not great enough. So it'll be difficult for users with low vision. And then it also provides you which success criteria this one fails. So it would be 1.4.3, which is contrast. And then you can go back to the details and look through the different options. So there was the contrast errors, and then there's a number of alerts here. So these are the ones that it wants to alert you to, and you can look into it for more information. I'm looking for one that might be a little bit easier to explain. So, well, earlier we talked about headings. So here they had skipped a heading level, and we can look at more information. And here there was a possible heading. So what this means is that text appears to be a heading, but is not a heading element. So why does this matter? Well, heading elements provide that important information of how the structure, or how the document is structured, like Sarika was saying earlier, and it's important for navigation for people who use assistive technology. And then it gives you a nice description of how to fix that. So if the paragraph is a section heading, use a heading element. And we won't get too far into the code, but there are ways to fix it, and it describes it here. And yeah, and it takes you through the rest of the alerts. And then it also does have some positive things. So here there is some features that they point out. And earlier we talked about alternative text. So this one actually does provide some alternative text. So as you can see here, this image had some writing, and it says to hear for life, listen with care. And they provide some alternative text. And they had provided the alternative text to say what was in the image, although it does not have a description of the image on the side here. So that's another great aspect of this checker. And you can continue, there's more features, some structural elements that goes into the headings as well. And some more information about navigation. And that is basically all for our demonstration. So I'll stop sharing and let Sarika continue.
Thank you, Katrina, for going through that with us today. Just gonna. Okay. So now we wanted to talk about, like, quickly summarize our research project and our current direction. So right now, like Justina said, we work with Lynn and Julius, and is also the team at eBase, and it's part of our OT program to enhance our knowledge and skills as OTs. So this is what our direction will be in our research project. So as we mentioned earlier, we know that many websites are not compliant to WCAG standards, and we need more studies to understand and gain a better understanding of common accessibility errors that occur through different countries internationally. And so we wanted to fill that gap. So the purpose of our research is to investigate web accessibility features based on the WCAG 2.0 success criteria of international OT and pediatric healthcare related websites. So these are our following research questions. So we want to know, do international occupational therapy websites and pediatric related websites meet the accessibility criteria outlined by WCAG 2.0 to address the needs of persons with disability? The second research question that we're going to address are, what are some criteria of these websites using manual checks that we could address based on essential accessibility criteria of WCAG 2.0?
Sorry, just having some technical difficulties. Okay, my mic is working now. So yeah, we will, in this research project, we'll be using a mixed methods approach. And this will be done to help critically analyze these websites and the resources provided within them using automatic evaluation tools, such as the one I showed you, which is Wave, and as well as A-Checker. And we will also be doing some manual checks to determine any human factors that impact operability, perceivability, understandability, and robustness of these web pages. And then the final goal of our research project is to share recommendations on how we can make these websites more accessible, and how that will help individuals have autonomy in making informed health decisions and other decisions, and empower clients.
So thank you for listening. Feel free to ask any questions. These are our references that we've used throughout the presentation as well.
Thank you, Sarika and Katrina. I'm just going to turn our attention to the chat just because I know there were a couple of questions that were dropped in while you were presenting. And the first is from Leslie. She asked, do you have to use preset headings, or would it still work if you define the heading itself? That is the font, the size, and the italics, etc.
So from my understanding, I'm not really familiar with too much coding, but I know that I think there's a CSS file that you could preset the headings. Oftentimes, a lot of websites just re-specify the heading style in each line of code. And that's why it gets a little confusing because it doesn't always match up with the heading level. Yeah, does anybody else? Well, thank you for the thank yous. I hope that answers your question.
I can add a little bit more as well, and Sarika, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but and like we said earlier, Sarika and I are still learning every day about how all this works. It can be a complicated area to navigate, but in terms of using bold and font size, that would not meet the criteria. It would have to be, like Sarika was saying, it needs to include those elements to make sure that it sets it apart from the other headings so that a screen reader would read it in the correct order and would read it as like a heading and not just read it all as one paragraph. So yeah, it would have to be set in that way. The font and size in the italics and bold and all that wouldn't do that. And I see someone, Kate, commented exactly.
Yeah, I was just going to extend an invitation to Kate if they wanted to jump in and add on in response to the question, Kate.
Oh, thanks. I'm sorry, I missed a lot of the presentation, but I'll catch up the video recording. I do this for a living, so I'm delighted to hear you doing it, and I can empathize with the complexity if it's not your core thing. I work in digital learning and I have done for a while. So yeah, it definitely needs to be done either at the style sheet or the HTML level. There's a lot of very interesting and easy to use guidance though that can help you in addition to the Wave tool. But yeah, you would need to set heading levels with an H1 element plus the heading, and it should flow logically throughout the website and across every page.
Thank you so much, Kate. And we have a question from Epiphany as well, and they ask, how will this method facilitate people with blindness disability? So I guess how do we use the tools, the accessibility tools, specifically for folks with visual impairments?
Katrina or Sarika, do you feel comfortable answering that?
Would it be possible for the question? I'm just not sure what the question is pertaining to. Which specific method was it?
Yeah, I think Epiphany is asking about screen readers and actually what is a screen reader? Epiphany, maybe you can clarify if that is what you were asking.
Yes, thank you so much. I was just asking if this facility can be used easily for people with visual impairments.
Do you mean the assessment of the websites, or do you mean?
Yes.
Okay, so like
assessing, yes, assessing the website.
So people who are blind often use screen readers. Are you familiar with what a screen reader is?
No, I know. No, I know that only they use a white cane for walking, but
okay.
Or other things for keyboard, there are some letters they can touch and be able to write and read. So for the website, I'm not yet getting well.
So a screen reader is an application that takes the words on a web page and makes them into audio. so that they can be heard rather than visually.
Okay, okay, okay.
So
Thank
that's,
you.
yeah, so that's why it's important that the information is well organized and can be read out audibly, so that the person who is hearing it can hear it in an organized way that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Epiphany. It's a great question. Sometimes we assume that people understand some of these
Yes.
assistive technologies, and we need to be reminded that many of us are not familiar with them. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question.
And maybe I will also jump in and just explain that is also why we ask people not to put questions into chat during the presentation itself, because people who are using screen readers then hear two voices. They hear the voice of the presenter, but they also hear the chat being read out. So it's like hearing two voices at the same time, and it can be confusing. So in the webinars, we ask people to hold the chat to the discussion time.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Epiphany, for your question. And we apologize if we didn't make it clear earlier what we meant by a screen reader. And thank you again, Lynn, for that explanation. Hopefully that helps clear things up. And again, that's why, like Lynn was saying, these WCAG success criteria are so important to help ensure that people using these types of assistive devices have access to websites. Were there any other questions?
None that I can see in the chat, but if anyone has a question, feel free to unmute your mic or raise your hand. We do have a few minutes left, but I just wanted to pose it out there to get people's thoughts.
I have one that came to me directly, so I'll just read it and then also respond. Can people with vision impairments make use of the checking applications? And I am not sure if that is the case. I think that's another type of research project that we could do. How do we include people with vision impairments and other disabilities in the checking of sites? And I think Kate might want to respond to this. Thank you, Kate.
Sorry, I feel a bit cheeky because it's your platform and I've joined belatedly and I don't know many of you at all. But anyway, I'm going to, yeah.
We're delighted to have you. Thank you.
I work with WCAG Detail and I run website audits myself. I'm sighted, but I have, I'm on the Asperger's spectrum and I've got ADHD, or I get distracted very easily. But I know someone in South Africa. I live in Cape Town. He lives in, I think, Limpopo. And he is blind and he is qualified in 3 different standards to run tests using software. So he runs accessibility tests using different pieces of software that you would use connected to his Braille. I think he uses JAWS, which is one of the screen reading softwares, and he's qualified in that. So it is very possible. And in fact, it's advisable if you're putting a website together to design it with people who have different kinds of impairment or different kinds of assistive technology needs. That might be a head pointer, or they might have arthritis, or they might have spasticity in their hands, or they might not be blind, but they've got low vision, or maybe, yeah, they get migraines and they can't read as easily, or they may be very busy and they may break their leg or break their arm and they only can use one hand. So it's actually one of the sort of ideal scenarios if you can test and design your sites with lots of people from different types, with different levels of need. But yes, it is possible for people who use a screen reader and or other assistive technology to run accessibility tests using the standards that are available internationally and the software that is available internationally.
Thank you very much, Kate. It seems to me and to some of the others who are working on this project and doing various kinds of work that this is really an area for development, like in the sense of there are jobs that could be created, there are companies that could be created. We know that there are some people who are doing this already, but it seems to me that there is a lot of area for expansion and potential. It's such an important area, and maybe we'll have some discussion about the business side of things at some point as well.
Yeah, there are a number of organizations normally in the US and the States and Canada and the North as such, or Europe, and because of the legislative and regulatory infrastructure, the requirement is higher. The obligation is required. So there's a lot of, and in Australia, there's quite a lot, and in New Zealand. I haven't heard of the gentleman I was speaking about earlier. He is qualified to do testing for the Homeland Security in the US. So at the moment, if you want to get work in this field in a country like South Africa, or I'm not sure about other countries, but you might look to an international environment to find that work. But I think there's definitely opportunity. I mean, the big players like Microsoft, Google, Facebook have their own accessibility teams. BBC has a huge team. But as far as I'm aware, in South Africa and Africa, maybe it's not as, it isn't, there's lots of other development things that we're still trying to get to be equal for everybody. So it isn't always at the top of the agenda. But the tide is rising, so I think people are definitely looking at that.
Thank you so much for sharing, Lynn. We have about 3 minutes, and I just wanted to ask folks to share if there's any particular online checkers that they found helpful in the past, just so we're sharing resources as well. In addition to the 4 or 5 that Katrina and Sarika provided. I see Kate added Axe Dev Tools, I guess Axe Development Tools. Okay. Okay, well, if something does come up and folks want to share outside the context of this webinar, please feel free to email myself or Lynn through the Pearl Network email address that will be added to the post-workshop resources. I know for me though, this was because it was a new topic, so it was a bit heavy and technical. So if anyone is in the same spot that I am, this webinar has been recorded and it will be posted on the YouTube channel, so you can refer back to it and also reach out to Katrina and Sarika if you would love to learn more about their research. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your contributions and participation. Kate, thank you for your expertise and offering that to us today. So I'm wishing you all a good afternoon or evening wherever you are, and we hope to see you on March 21st when we will have our webinar on, I'm trying to remember, but we will have a webinar run by Ellen.
Using smartphones in research.
Yes, using smartphone in research. So they will be sharing their research on access to smartphones, computers, and internet impact our research and collaboration. So that invite will be sent out shortly today, and we look forward to seeing you then. So have a good one, and thanks again.